Chapter 3. Secrets of the Essenes. After my beautiful mother's last tearful outburst of emotion, we stepped out of our home in the pre-dawn cold, even though it was almost mid-June and I was 3 weeks beyond my 5th birthday. I shivered in my cotton robe and pulled it more tightly about me. Neither my father nor any of the Aryans wore a headdress unless they were to be long in the hot sun of the unshaded desert. The crisp night wind touched our hair, and it went through mine with sighing fingers, as if the air itself grieved with my mother that youth was flown too soon. We walked swiftly along Nazar Road, which led from home to the big gate on the east side of the compound of the Essenes. But the silence of the skylit village turned into a bustle of purposeful activity and sound as we were passed through the ever-vigilant guard at the huge gate and entered the compound. Here, all was a bustle, though it was about 3 hours before sunup. Many groups or platoons of men moved in many directions, but there was a master design in everything they did. Each 12-man squad had a leader who seemed to direct as well as help do the work. Several squads were busy sweeping the very road on which we moved within the compound. Others moved swiftly bearing baskets of fresh-smelling bread or fruit. Even a few squads were busy doing exercises, either stooping, squatting, jumping, or the favorite, which was to throw themselves face down upon the ground, and then raise themselves 12 times, supported only by their toes and hands. Everything was done in lovely rhythm. Every move was accompanied by the sound of words or a rhythmic chant. Those who swept the streets counted rhythmically in Aramic, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and even Egyptian in turn, or said the alphabet of each in turn. Each man answered with fervor the leader, and I felt that they strove to formulate a harmony of movement and sound, and all in a pleasant, resonant, and vibrant voice. Each letter or number was said with a timbre and resonance of sustained tone that created a thread of living sound. Each man seemed to strive to make his voice more perfect than the others. One squad walked the way with us, and in 5 languages they repeated, "Blessed, oh blessed is the Lord, the God of compassion and all love, who has given me knowledge of truth and wisdom to tell forth his wonders unchecked, both day and night. Blessed, oh blessed is the Lord, for whose burdens I yearn, and in whose goodness I trust, on whom like a living rock my faith is founded in truth. Now that I know his truth, now that I look on his glory and have wit to understand them, I will always tell forth his wonders unchecked, both day and night. I give thanks unto my God, and extol him as the rock, the firm foundation of faith, and will gladly tell forth his wonders unchecked, both day and night." I was so enchanted with the beauty of the rhythmic phrases, repeated in many languages line by line, that I quite forgot myself and stepped through the giant doorway into the assembly hall, and glimpsed at least 1,000 white-clad figures kneeling upon the polished floor of the assembly. But not more than a blink could I look for a firm hand put me back into the night. "Not too swiftly, my son. Wait here a time in patience until the brotherhood is ready and the master calls." I stood alone in the darkness, surrounded by the sweet cadences of many tasks being done with rhythm and energy. I realized that this was but a perfection of the technique my mother had used to teach me over the years, a way to help learn the greatest possible amount in the shortest possible time. I started when a pleasant voice near me said, "Child, should you not pray?" I recognized the voice of the master of the first year, Habakkuk. "I would like to pray, sir, but I am too frightened." "Fear not, my child, for in all things I am always with you." Somehow these were the perfect words for my moment in aloneness and strain, and I found myself praying silently inside my own self for strength and for guidance. I felt the warmth of the presence of the master Habakkuk, although he was a dim outline in the faint glow of the skylight. But only a few minutes went by before the door opened and a voice demanded, "Who comes to this sacred portal? One who seeks light, truth, and wisdom." My father said, "Is he prepared?" "He is. He has come of a holy family and is clean and healthy in body and mind." Let the candidate be admitted to the hall, there to await the call of the gracious and perfect master. A moment later, I was inside the vast assembly hall, but there was not a person in the place. The overwhelming roof was supported on rows of enormous upright columns set about 10 paces apart. The light of a taper that had been thrust into my hand reflected from these columns endlessly, it seemed, but the enormous room was empty and silent. The only sound was my quickened breath and the thudding of my heart. I moved aimlessly into the hall and at last sat in the center of the room and stilled the beating of my heart. The taper burned out, but still there was neither sound nor motion. I wanted to cry, to run to the arms of my beautiful mother, but the thought of my father's look of disapproval kept me still. After a while, my physical self began to calm, my mental self began to ascend, and I felt at peace and safe. Daylight began to filter through the openings high up near the roof. These were covered with screens made of translucent goat's bladders and let in light while they kept out dust and wind. But I sat still, my mind turned inward to my heart, my eyes upon the light above, until my father spoke to me. "Arise, follow me." I looked for him, but my eyes were light-blinded, and I could not see him in the dark interior of the room, but I moved swiftly to follow the sound of his voice, and my trust was complete. A hand steadied me and guided me to the man-sized steps which led down from the center of the room. In the dark, my little legs were hardly long enough to reach, but we followed the steps down, then struck a level path along which we walked hand in hand. Soon the path began to rise, and then to curve. Then we came upon steps which wound upward in the blackness. When it seemed that my legs could carry me no further, we came upon a level area, took 40 paces, and I was shown by pressure that I should kneel. To my surprise, my knees did not strike bare ground but a cushion. I knew from the fragrance around us and the absolute blackness that we were within earthen rooms or a long cave. The air was still as it never is, under the starry heavens. There was that pungent darkness that is found even in dry caves beneath the ground. Before I could get my senses oriented, a voice boomed out of the blackness. "Who presents himself to the Brotherhood? The candidate who shall be nameless if he pass not our test." Is he prepared to bind himself under an oath for life, and to which he makes pledge of his very life? Are you prepared to bind yourself under an oath for life, and to which you make pledge of your very life, my son? Yes, Father, he is ready, perfected master of light. It is well, let the will of the Brotherhood be done and the oath administered. A voice trembled through my body, with liquid notes reaching ears like warm honey reaches the tongue. My father's voice was more wonderful and more resonant, but this voice was a thing of melody and beauty, so fine and pure that its very sound waked the heart. I was so enchanted with the very sound of that voice that I did not actually hear the first part of the oath, but remembering later, I think that part of my oath which can be now revealed went thus. I, a poor, lowly, and unnamed candidate, do seek admission into the brotherhood of the elect, the brothers of light, and bowing myself humbly before the perfect Master, do promise and bind myself for all my life to the following oath and each of the several items of the covenant. Above all, I will honor my Almighty Father in heaven and serve him. I will show those who have rule over any land in which I may be, for under my Father which is in heaven, nobody has the rule of man for long without the aid of the Almighty Father. I will obey all my superiors in the brotherhood of light. If exalted by my brothers to position of authority, will never misuse that authority or abuse anyone of lesser stature or power. Either as a voter or elector of the Brotherhood will my demeanor and worthiness be an example for others to emulate. I will deal justly with my fellow man, even as I deal justly with my brothers. I will live as an example of a true and pure heart and exercise justice and honesty to all men. I will harm no man either by impulse or under influence of other men or by duress. Rather, throughout my life, in secret or sunlight, I will shun injustice and show mercy, and ever undaunted and untiring, I will further the cause of justice and of truth. I will preserve my mind from impure thoughts, from baseless impulses, and I will preserve my hands and soul from the stain of unjust gain, or even just gain at the cost of my fellow man. I will studiously prepare myself in body to be strong and healthy, in mind to be firm and original, in memory to be agile and retentive, and to be faithful unto death in all the assigned duties of the Almighty Father or the perfected Father of light. I will strive to pass the tests of the 4 levels of the Brotherhood, and will be subservient and obedient unto all the requirements of my elders, or, rather, throughout my life, in secret or sunlight, I will shun injustice and show mercy, and ever undaunted and untiring, I will further the cause of justice and of truth. I will preserve my mind from impure thoughts, from baseless impulses, and I will preserve my hands and soul from the stain of unjust gain, or even just gain at the cost of my fellow man. I will studiously prepare myself in body to be strong and healthy, in mind to be firm and original, in memory to be agile and retentive, and to be faithful unto death in all the assigned duties of the Almighty Father or the perfected Father of light. I will strive to pass the tests of the 4 levels of the brotherhood, and will be subservient and obedient unto all the requirements of my elders or brothers in daily activity. I will contend not with my brothers or anyone, and if I am smitten upon one cheek, will yet turn the other in pity and in love. I will claim no power or credit of my own, even as I will claim no income or property, knowing that all goods, talents, and capacities come from the Father which is in heaven, through his perfect love, and all I can do, others can do, and more also, for it is the Father within which does all works. Therefore I will hold myself to be the child of no man but of the Almighty and everlasting Father which is in heaven, and will accept as his representative on earth the Father of the brotherhood of light. To hear, I was in full accord, but the next phrase caused me to stop, and my voice would not follow the chanter. The phrase was, I will leave and disclaim the house of my father and mother, and will never marry, have intercourse, or procreate children. I will leave and disclaim the house of my father and mother, and will never marry. 3 times he repeated the words. I could not say them. It was as if a hand had stopped my mouth, for I remembered the love of my beautiful mother, and the joy I had of my brothers, and adoration I had for my father. The voice of the patriarch asked, Do you not wish to go on? I do, sir, but I will not swear to forsake my family, my father, and my beautiful mother. Nor will I swear not to bear children, for above all things I love them. But I will keep your other commandments in love and obedience. Sir, there was a long pause, and then something of a chuckle in the darkness. Cantor, let that clause of the covenant be stricken from the oath, if no brother objects. At this juncture, it has little validity anyway. I thought I heard a ripple, a sigh of smothered laughter from many men, but the beautiful voice continued with the oath. I will turn to the brotherhood for guidance, spiritual, physical, and mental, and for support and maintenance and satisfaction of all my worldly needs. And I promise that if he is in need, I will never deny to a brother aid, help, or defense, though I may lose my life in his behalf. I will at all times faithfully interpret and explain anything of the laws of the brotherhood, but never in any other spirit than I myself have received it from the trained and holy elders. And I will faithfully preserve the goods and the properties of the brotherhood, and hide and take care of the archives, books, and learning devices of the brotherhood, and will reveal never under any circumstances to any outsider the place of the treasures or the names of the angels with whom the secret Master of Light has held communication. I will at no time, even at the forfeit of life, under travail or torture, betray or reveal any secret of the Brotherhood of Light to anyone who has not been prepared to receive it by the vote of the sacred order of the perfected ones. To all this I bind myself for life, and except for this, no oath shall be sacred, and all promises shall be kept with yea or nay. But to this sacred oath I bind myself for all my living days. And if I break this oath, I shall deliver myself into the hands of the sons of light to have my bowels torn, out with a sword, my head dismembered from my body, and my flesh strewn upon the earth for the eaters of flesh. The voice stopped, and I thought the oath was over, but it was not. The patriarch demanded, Brothers, will you accept this oath and thus bind the candidate to the sons of light? Yes, Master of the Perfect. The sound must have come from 1,000 voices echoing in the cavern. Say, Candidate, who comes now unto the brotherhood? Jeshua Joseph Bar Joseph. My father whispered in my ear, and I said the name aloud. Who vouches for this candidate's honor and holds himself to suffer the fate if the candidate breaks his oath and delivers not himself to punishment? I, Joseph of Nazar, and Essene of Nazar, sponsor of this untried candidate, why do you place your life in jeopardy for his performance of his covenant? Because the tension of nerve and mind seemed to have reached its highest point. But I was not prepared, as was any candidate, for what happened within the next few breaths. There was a sound, a sort of rumble, which filled the air and then began to shake the very earth. The pad upon which my knees rested jumped even as my heart and my ears were appalled at the mighty sound. There was at the same instant a blinding light, and my being leapt up in terror and in ecstasy. My body was instantly bathed in warmth which was a balm to my excited senses, a peace in the turmoil in my mind. Suddenly my startled eyes were filled with the blinding glory of the rising sun, which rested as an orange-gold disk upon the eastern hills. The entire end of a giant vault had suddenly been dropped away, and I was facing the new sun, and its rays poured down upon me like shafts of burnished spears hurled at me, and at me alone. I was in the mouth of a gigantic cave and was kneeling beside but slightly in front of my father. The patriarch, the secret master, was seated in a golden chair and dressed in golden robes, his face toward us, his back to the sun. The sun surrounded him in a magnificent halo of light, so breathtaking in its sudden magical appearance that I felt transfixed with emotion, but the tension was increased even more. As if the word my father had started to speak was their signal, 1,000 beautiful voices continued in unison, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." An instant later, 1,000 voices spoke out of the darkness behind me in the recesses of the cave, "This is my beloved brother, for whom I will lay down my life." Within the cave around me, as far as the light would let me see, there were ranks or squads of white-robed figures, each kneeling, each crossing his right hand over his breast, his palm over the heart. And the feeling mounted as an eagle in the sunlight. The first chorus of those around me began a chant in glorious voices. When the cadences dropped at the end of a phrase, the distant voices picked up the thought as a running cannon. The way it was done, it was solemn praise to the universal master of all, followed immediately by a strain of praise to the secret earthly master, who was a symbol of the brotherhood and also of the universal power come to earth. This was a paean of double joy. O Father which art in heaven, O Father which art on earth, all hallowed is your name, revered is your holy name, your sacred kingdom is come, the sacred kingdom is yours, and your will may now be done, and the Father's high will may be done on earth as it is in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, give us this day our meal of love, and forgive us our trespasses. And forgive us our trespasses even as we forgive those who trespass against us, even as we forgive brothers who trespass against us. For great is your kingdom, for great is your power, eternal is your glory, and we are your children forever and forever. Amen. And love you forever. Amen. Truly I say unto you, that the sound was a thing of moving beauty, and the symbolism of the Son as a heavenly representative of the universal Father, and the secret Master as the earthly representative was itself a poem. The moment was of such beauty and transcendent power that I felt lifted up into another dimension of enjoyment. All of the personal love and devotion which I had felt for my family now became a universal love and devotion poured out upon these brothers. Love for each was pouring from me, not a personal love, but an impersonal love that was boundless, and I thought that surely I had reached the greatest possible heights of joy, but more was yet to come in other ceremonies and other initiations. From that moment on, every second of time I spent with the Essenes was devoted to improving the physical, mental, and moral qualities of my being. No time was wasted, yet there was never a feeling of hurry. When the ritual of the oath was finished, I was admonished that Essenes expect constant improvement upon all levels of man's behavior, and told to present myself to Master Habakkuk for directions and instructions in languages, numbers, sciences, and deportment. To Master Horenhab, he of the golden voice, I was to present myself for instruction in voice, music, speech, and rhythm. To my father, Master Joseph, Master of Masters, I was to present myself for history and religious instruction of the Jews, and also for the history and sacred religious instruction of the Brothers of Light. We then rose and made our way back in squadrons of 12 with a leader toward the assembly hall. I realized that we had gone underground beneath the entire village of Nazar and up a tunnel inside the hill overlooking the eastern valley, and then into an enormous natural cave which might have held every house on the lovely hillside. I found later the magic of the earth shaking and sudden admission of the sun was accomplished by dropping a wall of rocks from the mouth of the cave into the lip of a cave below. Later, we carried the stones back up the incline and placed them in position for the next initiation, and this very effort was done with chanting, counting, and recitations in many languages. It was said to be an exercise to improve our strength, especially our backs and legs. Even the first day, I was not allowed to miss the exercise and was given rocks to carry up the steep incline that were almost, but never quite beyond my strength. When the sun was well beyond the center line of day, we heard the silver tones of the gong, which called us to our midday meal, which was called the Feast of Love. We all began to assemble toward the assembly hall, but by way of a roofed structure that had no sides. Here we entered and took off our work clothes and walked through the building clad only in a fly in front and rear, tied with a string about the waist. At the other end of the building, we came upon a trough which was kept filled by novitiates who ran from the stream 100 yards away, chanting, counting, and recitations in many languages. It was said to be an exercise to improve our strength, especially our backs and legs. Even the first day, I was not allowed to miss the exercise and was given rocks to carry up the steep incline that were almost, but never quite beyond my strength. When the sun was well beyond the center line of day, we heard the silver tones of the gong, which called us to our midday meal, which was called the Feast of Love. We all began to assemble toward the assembly hall, but by way of a roofed structure that had no sides. Here we entered and took off our work clothes and walked through the building clad only in a fly in front and rear, tied with a string about the waist. At the other end of the building, we came upon a trough which was kept filled by novitiates who ran from the stream 100 yards away, bearing 2 buckets of water. Since the bathing form was higher than a man's head, they had to climb up a ladder before they could dump their buckets and race back toward the stream. We took a quick bath and walked on to our own rack and towel where we dried, and then donned our white robes. Then we assembled in squadrons for entry into the assembly hall. But on that first day I had not yet earned the privilege of bathing or eating with the brothers, both being considered sacred. Indeed, my first feast of love was a lesson in itself, as with everything else within the compound. At my first meal, I was guided to a table in a far corner to the right of the secret master, but far over in the corner. 2 of the brothers who had seated themselves at the table before I arrived got up and moved away. I was left completely alone, not in sight of my father without stretching, and out of view of the brothers. Master Habakkuk merely said, "Sit there, keep your head bowed. Do not eat until the Master of Light speaks to you and tells you you may eat. Sit still." I sat at the lonely table, and while the table was low, the bench was high, and soon my legs were asleep and I wanted to squirm. I sat still while long passages from the Manual of Obedience were read in Aramaic, Greek, and Latin. Before the reading was over, I had the passage memorized. It ran, "Every person who may desire to join the community of the elect must pledge himself to respect the Father and his fellow men, to live in accordance with the rules of the community, to seek the Father diligently, to do what is good and worthy in sight of the Father, and in accordance with what he has commanded through Moses and through the prophets who are his servants, to keep far from evil and cling to good, to act truthfully and righteously and justly, and walk not in stubbornness, guilty at heart, lustful of the eyes, or doing any manner of evil in thought or deed whatsoever, to bring into the bond of mutual love all who have shown their ability and willingness to carry out the statutes of God's perfect brotherhood." After this special paragraph, there was a blessing read in Hebrew, Egyptian, and then Greek. It ran, "Father in heaven, bless these brothers in the eternal covenant which will stand forever, and open to them from heaven the perpetual spring of faith, unfailing. Blessings, and make them privy to that sacred knowledge which is possessed by the holy being. Bless them with perpetual spring, and withhold not from those who thirst the living waters of truth and right. Bless and keep them from all evil, and destroy the frenzy of the damned. Bless and keep them from every corrupting spirit. Favor them with salvation, and cause them to delight in peace all abounding. Favor them with the Holy Spirit, and with loving kindness and understanding, and keep them in truth, health, and the eternal covenant. Bless them with insight into eternal truth, and give peace between each man, even unto his offspring forever." When these blessings were said over and over in 3 languages, I had them memorized. But I was not ready for the hurt of hunger and pride that came. For novices in blue clothes, which was the color of work robes, came into the hall in squadrons, carrying fragrant fresh bread, jars of savory vegetables and lamb, and also freshly cooked fruit. They also put down before me a bunch of ripe grapes, and each grape lured me like a friendly eye. The fragrance was almost overpowering, so was my hunger, and I resented having been told not to eat until directed to do so. I looked around from under my lashes and felt all the more hurt that no one was looking at me or cared if I disobeyed. My little heart rebelled and my stomach began to roar its resentment at such treatment. Wasn't the order silly? Why was such a useless order given? There could be no cause not to eat, everyone else was. My hunger and my rebellion mounted until I thought of leaving the bench and running home to the arms of my beautiful mother. I could explain to her that it was foolishness to starve to death when food sat on the table and grapes almost reached for one's mouth. Then I decided I would stay, but I would not even taste their old food. And before my eyes, the hot foods and the vegetables and lamb began to look cold and to be covered with that film of grease known only to lamb dishes. Unperturbed by my rebellious self-pity, the brotherhood ate in silence or with a minimum of talk, and during the entire meal, one of the brothers stood at the far end of the hall and read from the Torah in Hebrew and Greek, and he also started in Latin when the perfected master raised his hand. Brothers, are all finished? Then let it be known that the son of Joseph has passed his first test in obedience. Joseph bar Joseph, you may now eat. I dared not raise my head, for there were huge tears of self-pity in my eyes, and I was disturbed that my good hot food had grown cold. I pretended to say my personal prayers while I squeezed the tears from under my eyelids, but then I found I was truly praying in my heart for strength and stamina to learn to heal. I heard a small click and looked to see my plate of foods taken away by a young novitiate. I could not speak, but a moment later a bigger platter of food was placed before me, piping hot, and I fell to eating with a will, with a great joy in my heart, for I had seen that my father half rose to look across the room to my indignity. I knew by the look in his eyes and the slightest of nods that he was pleased with me. I ate steadily while the brothers ran through a series of prayers to which I did not listen and did not memorize, but soon my little stomach was filled and the ordeals of the day seemed bearable again. The prayers were finished, as I finished my meal, and the secret master said, "In humility, let every man carry the plate of the brother to his right to the scullery and wash it well." It turned that the perfect master came to my table and took my plate and carried it to the scullery. "Sir, I should carry yours." "No, son, this is our lesson in humility. For not even the Lord of the brothers of light is above his duty to the order, or above the most menial of tasks. Remember that." Look in his eyes and the slightest of nods that he was pleased with me. I ate steadily while the brothers ran through a series of prayers to which I did not listen and did not memorize, but soon my little stomach was filled and the ordeals of the day seemed bearable again. The prayers were finished, as I finished my meal, and the secret master said, "In humility, let every man carry the plate of the brother to his right to the scullery and wash it well." It turned that the perfect master came to my table and took my plate and carried it to the scullery. "Sir, I should carry yours." "No, son, this is our lesson in humility. For not even the Lord of the brothers of light is above his duty to the order, or above the most menial of tasks. Remember that." Every move was used to train the body, the mind, the heart, the morals, or the spirit of the brotherhood. How swiftly and how simply they taught. I had been taught the need for obedience without argument or justification of authority. I had been taught perseverance in spite of personal desire or hardship, and I had been taught true humility and service, all at a single meal. And my training had not yet begun, or, verily, had it. How could one say when his official instructions began in the brotherhood of perfection? Each assignment, duty, detail, or act could be and usually was for the purpose of training someone along the line. The training stopped not until the secret master himself was reached, and at times he seemed to be the intent of all training and of all effort. For the method of precept and example was employed fully, but there was ample time spent under personal discipline such as lettering, composition, ciphering, and art. No concept was either too small or too large for the deliberate use of the brotherhood. Each week, each man of a squad was expected to give a resume of what he had learned that week, and woe betide him who missed the implication and the spiritual value of some of the physical drills. I was assigned to a squadron of new men, and our first duties were to sweep every inch of the street of the compound and do it daily. This we did while rhythmically chanting our alphabet, counting to 1,000 and doing mental sums, or repeating well-known maxims in any of the 5 languages, and at the command of our leader. Our leader was a man of the desert, Ishmael, a broad man, and medium short, like myself. But he was dark of skin and brown of eye, and as time went by, I came to know that he was a Hanif, a natural mystic, a man who had sudden insights into things beyond the physical or mental. He was, as most mystics are, a man of powerful and contagious joy, but his moods ran from the prankish to the harsh disciplinarian. But in any mood, he did 10 times the work of the other 12 in his squad. We came to love him and to fear him with equal candor. For each month, we were to tell each member of our squadron how we felt toward him, and our reaction to him was of no apparent consequence to him. Under Ishmael's rule, I was granted no special favors, but had to do my share of whatever work was assigned to the squad, and to do it to the utmost of my skill and with all the strength of my little body. When it came our turn to carry water for the daily bath of love, I was given 2 buckets of small size, but as the weeks went by and my strength increased, Ishmael gave me ever larger buckets to hasten the development of my strength. Reach! Reach! Do all you can, then more, for progress lies not in doing, but in the reaching. He who does not overreach himself every day will never grasp heaven. One day in my 2nd year, just a week after Simon was born to my beautiful mother, I was carrying water when a sudden flash of insight came to me. During our rest period, I cut a curved branch from a willow tree, notched it, and tied a leather thong at each end. These thongs I then tied to the buckets. Using this crude yoke, I was able to carry the 2 regular-sized buckets. I was so proud and expected a compliment from Ishmael, but he said nothing and did not seem to notice my daily bath of love. I was given 2 buckets of small size, but as the weeks went by and my strength increased, Ishmael gave me ever larger buckets to hasten the development of my strength. Reach! Reach! Do all you can, then more, for progress lies not in doing, but in the reaching. He who does not overreach himself every day will never grasp heaven. One day in my 2nd year, just a week after Simon was born to my beautiful mother, I was carrying water when a sudden flash of insight came to me. During our rest period, I cut a curved branch from a willow tree, notched it, and tied a leather thong at each end. These thongs I then tied to the buckets. Using this crude yoke, I was able to carry the 2 regular-sized buckets. I was so proud and expected a compliment from Ishmael, but he said nothing and did not seem to notice my improvement. But the next day on our rest period, he crept to the bank of the stream and tested my yoke. He then tied 2 buckets on each side and tested that. I pretended to sleep in the shade of our special tree, but inside, my heart was eating me with anger. The next day, he brought 2 enormous buckets holding almost 3 times as much as an ordinary bucket, and during our rest period, he crept down to the river to try the yoke with that enormous weight. But still he said nothing, except that on the day before the 5th Sabbath, he told me to bring my yoke to the assembly hall. This was the time of the quarterly report to the brotherhood, and he called me forth to demonstrate that I could carry much more weight safely with a crude yoke. He then took the yoke and connected it to his enormous buckets, carried them himself, and then asked the masters to test the yoke. This was done, and the sons of light voted to have 200 yokes made of special wood and curved at the neck so that it would not hurt the bone, and our squadron was taken from its water carrying assignment and assigned to make the yokes under my father's skilled direction. Ishmael then gave me full credit for the invention of the yoke, which would allow the transport of water in half the time and with half the effort, thus freeing squadrons of brothers for other work. But I felt a deep remorse at my bitter anger at his testing my yoke, and told the assembly, "Sirs, I would like you to know Ishmael of the desert did test and try the method, and his mind and skill perfected its use. He deserves more credit than I, for I saw no benefit to the brotherhood, but only to myself." The secret master stroked the gray strands of his long beard and nodded. When Ishmael protested and said that the credit was mine, for credit at that time of training might determine if we were allowed to progress in the studies, the Son of Man raised his hand and said, "Brothers, let us make the accounting thus. We will then render unto Bar Joseph that due which is his, and unto Ishmael that due which is his. Thus the holy order of the Father shall have no contention." The work was long, but it was not really hard, and the studies were easy. Well, all studies except writing and composition. I could never cipher with great ease and beauty, and it was as if I could not speak when I tried to write down my thoughts. Such effort! But in 2 years I had mastered all of the learning of 4 years and even more. For this I deserve no credit. My mother and father had taught me well, and the Father in heaven gave me a mind that was agile and a memory that was as prodigious as it was accurate. This was the marvel of my preceptors. Once I was called upon in a strange emergency. Was the habit of the It Was Brotherhood to pay all its debts to the other compounds for lodging, food, materials, and other things once a year. On this year I had been assigned to the stores and accounting master that I might learn of such things. I had seen the scroll on which all our accounts were made before it was sent to our scroll keeper, Baradas of Hebron, and to the other compounds, at such places as Bethany and Mount Carmel. Our brother was killed by a lion in the Samarian desert, and the scroll was destroyed by its claws and teeth. I was asked if I could recall the exact items on the scroll in all columns. I meditated on it for an hour, then in a frenzy of haste recreated the scroll exactly, entering the amounts into each column and recalling accurately whether the amounts were due in Roman or Jewish money. This was most important, since if we received Roman coin, or if anyone demanded it, we were compelled by Roman law to pay in Roman money. Also involved was our belief that the Brotherhood must be exacting and careful to meet every legal requirement so that no criticism might befall our actions. Jewish laws require that everyone attend the local synagogue of the Temple of Jerusalem on the Sabbath and on certain religious feast days. Our Brotherhood was most punctilious about attendance, although we were not basically of the Jewish faith, as were some of the other compounds. Some of our compounds, particularly near the northeast tip of the Dead Sea, were entirely Jewish. Furthermore, the religious instruction of the Jewish faith we received within our compound was more intensive than that received even in the synagogue. In fact, one of the tests for those who wanted to rise to be masters or teachers of the Brotherhood was based on our saying, "He who can teach the teachers of others may teach the lowest of our brothers." To be allowed to start at the lowest grade of teacher in our compound, one was required to subtly but effectively teach the high priest at the temple at Jerusalem. Before one was allowed to attempt this, he must be able to teach his own rabbi. What he taught had to be within their own faith and their own belief, and was to be done without arousing prejudice or antagonism, and with complete respect for the priest and his belief. When I decided to attempt this, it led me to the amazing discovery of the White Brotherhood.